Hey folks, welcome to my April practice reflections and favourites video. To those who are new here, this is a look back at my practice over the month and includes everything from divination to other elements of my craft, my general hobbies, other life events, updates, you name it. It's a smattering of everything. And the way that I've been starting these in 2023 is by looking back at my year ahead spread and the month. As many of you know who have been following along for a while, I am using the 𝗵𝘁𝗺𝗏 Tarot, the Memento Mori Oracle and my 𝗵𝘁𝗀𝗏𝗺 runes. So we've got the Judgment card here. And judgment seemed to be rife in all of its forms throughout the month, from awakening and just really like catalysts to realisation, and a lot of energy that was occasionally quite palpable. To be honest, mostly my direct kind of dalliance with this tarot archetype was the former. Really what came through for me was the final dregs of excavation, but in a way where it just felt like a breath of fresh air. Like the tough part had, I suppose, already been done, and then there was this moment after, coming to the ending, the finale almost of a build-up. And I have to say, this particular card from the deck, and I am going to talk about the deck in particular this month, this doesn't really evoke much for me visually though, other than I do kind of imagine this figure looking back at where they came and what came before them, which is a nice layer. So you can see the World card looks in the opposite direction. It's kind of how I would read it. But aside from that, it doesn't really do or evoke much for me in particular, which most of the images in this particular deck do. But it was really interesting anyway, because sometimes when things surface, I don't feel like they're necessarily a shock or new, but more like I said, this growing sensation that becomes just ever more familiar and present, but isn't fully formed. And it's not always good or bad, it's just really dependent on the time and the context. This is really how it unfolded for me, and it's no lie, I've had an interesting few months, feeling a lot more up and down than I'd have liked. But by the end of April, even with a new back injury, I feel like I can breathe a little bit more deeply and just a little bit more freely, which has been really nice. And then of course a part of this was salt. To be honest, there was only really one statement that I got come through from this card in particular this month, which I shared on my Instagram summary also, which is "you are the salt of the earth." And that's something that's said quite commonly over here. My stepmom's always talking about loving people who are the salt of the earth, which then has a particular meaning to it as well. But that's the kind of thing that I heard ringing in my ears, I suppose, and it didn't really go much further than that. And then I've got my rune, which is 𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. This is listen to Tegan pronounce runes wrong. And 𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂 felt like an embodied experience of just kind of gentle relief as I traversed the second quarter. So not of everything and not all at once. Again, it was more of this simmering kind of, but coming to a boil. It's really hard to explain that kind of, that cuspy point in between. But it felt like a few doors closed meant that in the future a few more would open, which is usually something I would say is quite a cliche, but I had this moment of faith that has been rather sought after, honestly. And I ended my month in the forest as well, which was incredibly peaceful and rejuvenating and really felt like a return home. Not that I don't love our house or our home, but there is something about the forest that will take me to a whole new place. The spirit of it just feels really connective, and during that time it felt like an initiation of this next cycle, with 𝗤𝗄 marking the harvest, so to speak, which is something that, as I've studied it, it seems to often be linked with. It felt a little bit more like adjusting to spring, which I'm kind of late to the party, but what's new? I find the winter months really difficult to shake, to be honest, and this isn't a new feeling as an adult anyway, but my time spent kind of surrounded by more trees than my heart could desire, because let me tell you, I love them. They feel like such old spirits that witness far more seasons than you or I could ever hope to. And their various like aged bark textures are like gloriously wrinkled and lived in skin. And I think that that time away really seems to have created a little spark and a little more flow, but in a way where it's less overwhelming, so far steadier, like I said, which feels like a more realistic expectation for me. I'm really not trying to live up to anyone else this year, or keep up with anyone else, or anything like that, whether that be my expectation or someone else's. Like, my pace really needs to be determined by my body, my needs, capabilities, and obviously those differ from person to person. So with these offerings this month, I've really been trying to release the belief that I had been holding on to, and that occasionally had been told to me in one way or another as well. This kind of concept that the reason that others get more done than me, whether that's cleaning more of the house or doing more content, or, you know, insert whatever, it's because they work harder or they want it more, which is a really unhelpful frame of reference. And while others can totally believe this, I don't really know why I decided to carry it as a belief for so long. Definitely some internalised stuff going on, because I haven't always been disabled. I haven't always had chronic pain either. And I've always considered myself a hard worker. And what that looks like now is different. But, you know, I don't want to carry something that isn't really mine anymore. So it's been a small but big month. Make of that what you will. There's been some kind of rhythmic changes, and funny enough, I've often said that for me the new year feels like it starts sometime in spring. You know, it's always sometime around these months. And so while I enjoy the layers of what's considered like the witch's new year, and I celebrate the new year based on the calendar, internally this period of time is the shift for me. So I thought we would then go into a little bit of Patreon and practice recaps with some life updates smattered in there before we get to the rest of the decks. But for anyone wondering, this is the Animal Allies Oracle 1 or 2. Sorry, I can't remember what animal is from which anymore, because I have mixed them up. But this is the representation of the animal that we worked with in April. And there really isn't anything for me to show you yet, so stick with me. But I had some new health stuff going on in April, because the battle never seems to settle for very long. And I've had some investigations and some scans. I'm due some surgery that I had sort of been putting off. I'm not sure when it will be yet, because of other consultations that I need to have, but April was pretty chaotic for several weeks in quite a compact way just because of that. During the month of April in Patreon, we gently worked with Duck for our animal Gnosis, and it was a month that was less driven by their theme through its entirety. But what was really fun was many of us were able to observe duck in their natural habitats, you know, even if it wasn't this particular species, which is the mallard. There are often ducks in at least the various countries in the world that my patrons seem to exist in. Also, I ended up on a duckling rescue mission for several hours whilst I was on my forest getaway, because I can't switch off from this life. So here they are, quickly.
4, 5.
We believe both mum and dad were found in the end, but they had been left alone for too long, so they were at risk. It was getting dark and cold, and also people and their children were trying to interfere with them. So myself, a person who worked at the park by the forest, and my partner in tow went to business, basically. Because 11 years in with me, and he's used to doing these things now, and was actually very protective. But yeah, sometimes the real work with animals is not just the witchy ways that our books and the craft kind of describe it through spells and metaphor and archetype or whatever it is, but it's by being present with them, having respect for our local animals, giving back when we can, or just really learning more of what we need but from them, or educated resources. So duck was often in my heart and my mind, but for the rest of our Patreon month we focused on tarot quite a bit, and we dove into the 4 elements. And what I wanted to do with those was really not just to give meanings, but kind of like exercises, questions, considerations, prompts and ideas to really engage with them more and understand them through that really personal experience. And of course, because whilst predominantly people see the elements one way through tarot, there are some decks and some systems that do change that up. So if you're familiar with the element, you can then begin to add the other layers in. So it was kind of a bigger dive into it rather than a very beginner or a surface overview. And then after that, I actually did 2 videos which were requested, and they were around deck combinations, tarot and oracle, but not just what looks nice, but really getting into the why, the how, ways I approach pairings, how many decks I pair, and just sharing examples the whole way through my talking about it as well, so live readings. And for the Coven tier, I also at the end of the month shared a rather intimate piece around rune feeding, and also discussing the reclamation of menstrual blood in my practice, and also sharing life, you know, with endometriosis and how that plays into this whole thing for me, and how that changes the way that I approach a lot of those things in particular. And so quickly before we move on, you've seen the ducklings, but here's a few wee clips from some of my other forest moments. Was so needed. I walked further than I should have and swam, which is possibly another reason that my back just ended up maxing out. Sadly, I don't get normal warning signs from my body, and ironically was trying to take it easy. I would say live and learn, but sometimes I get to the stage where I just feel like I have to live. But aside from my back going midday on like the 4th day, and we were there for 5, I really relished every other moment. It was heaven if there ever was such a thing. And I took 3 decks with me, but I only used them once each. And to be honest, this far along in my tarot practice, I don't often pull cards for myself daily. Sometimes it doesn't even happen weekly, and then I will again, and then it changes. It's very kind of fluid, dependent on the desire and direction of why I want to converse with the cards, rather than back when it was predominantly about study. And I'm not saying that I don't study now, but you get what I'm saying, hopefully. It's just different. So the first deck that I took was the 𝗵𝘁𝗍𝗏 Tarot, as I'm still really getting to know this one in particular. It's a funny deck. It's one that I read very kind of rogue with, meaning that the art inspires so much of where I get to in particular in this deck. It's just kind of a funny little weirdo. I don't really know how to describe it any other way. It's actually possibly one of the weirder decks I own. One of the reasons being is there's kind of a lack of consistency between a handful of very like 𝗬𝗏𝗺𝗀𝗃 made images and then the pre-existing artwork, which is my favourite, that completely go off brand from any and all systems, it seems. And it's not that the art style is weird, at least not to me, because this is definitely my taste. This is kind of death work meets the Fae realm. It's a really interesting one, and it's such a gorgeous deck, and I'm besotted with most of the cards in terms of that, but it's just odd to me. I enjoy it, but it is just odd. Obviously I have a few gripes, because I used to be a big lover of US Games cardstock, but obviously the tides turn and things change, and I'm not really into their new cardstock. I like their cardstock from like the 90s and the 80s. It seems to be okay, and I love the artwork enough to really give it a go. Some of them are just so detailed. They're really good for storytelling, and when I say storytelling, I don't even mean reading the cards, I mean playing with the cards, which is something that I feel like quite a few of us do. There's definitely other YouTubers out there that talk about it as well, other creative, playful, imaginative ways to use our cards. And I think that because, like I said, I'm not always reading for myself, although I do a lot more card work with others, I often have the cards out for other reasons and not just for ritual and stuff as well. This is one of my favourites in particular, actually. So I took that with me and did a little bit of tarot poetry with it. Two of my friends and I run a tarot challenge over on Instagram, of which I need to do one more piece for. But if you don't have Instagram but you like pretty pictures and written posts, then if you check out the community tab on YouTube, I've been sharing them there, and I often share a bunch of stuff over there, so it's possibly worthwhile checking it out if you're interested. Then I took my Woodlands Warden, I can never say it quickly, my Woodland Wardens Oracle away with me, because if this isn't a deck that's made for it, then I don't know what is. But I can tell I took it away with me because I just had to wipe dirt off of the side of it. This is a really interesting one, because I think I've mentioned it in passing on a couple of videos, but I haven't felt too compelled to speak about it in depth just yet, because my awareness of this deck is that there's quite an influx of others already doing so, and I've realised I think I have a bit of a thing about talking about older decks, actually, and not always massively old, because the turnover of decks has become crazy fast now. I don't mean in my collection, I just mean with what becomes new. But I suppose I feel a bit of fatigue around and I use that term loosely, when decks get released and I see them over and over, and it's not that I don't enjoy the people I watch who are talking about them, because I really do, but then I'm done. Like, I don't really want to add to the conversation at that time often. So I really love this, but I feel like I haven't mentioned it very much on here, perhaps more on Instagram. But I'm also not sure I would say anything new, to be honest. I don't always pay attention to the plants, although these are not good examples because I know them. If I'm less familiar with the plants, like passion flower, for example, I just kind of either link them to the word or words that's included, or more commonly I just leave that all together and focus on the animal and my experience with them or what I know about them, and I'm really happy to use the deck that way. I will say that the artwork is some of my all-time favourite, if I haven't said that already, and whilst we never need any more decks, I would love to see this artist make a tarot, because if it looked like this, I would be aesthetically enamoured. But anyway, I'm really enjoying this. And I pair it with, sometimes with the next deck that I'm going to show, which was the third one I took. And that is the Anima Mundi Tarot, which was a sweet, thoughtful gift from my brother at Christmas. This and the 𝗬𝗁𝗄𝗃 Tarot are the two animals that I use a lot with the Wardens Oracle, but I also really like it with my Antique Anatomy Tarot, so I do switch it up. But back to this, I wanted this deck for such a long time that I really thought by the time that I had it that I would be tired of the imagery, but this was just fantastic. I really, really love it. It holds a similar-ish place for me as my Wild Unknown in terms of how I feel the overall images read together, but it's kind of warmer and softer, and it has that mix between pippish and animal pippish stuff going on as well. I feel like the two would actually play really interestingly together because of this, but I haven't tried them out yet, so maybe that could be a thing, because I do occasionally like reading two tarot decks together. Anything more kind of feels redundant to me, but then I'm aware that for some people two tarot decks would feel redundant. So now, before I go into the next bit, I just want to reiterate, you know, favourites is very much just that, old, new, used, whatever, and you can probably tell that over time. But during April I won just the most beautiful giveaway, which not only landed me with some wonderful items, but was the time to buy the creator's other deck, because I've always wanted this. So my partner kindly offered to buy it for me. 𝗬𝗁𝗄𝗃, if anyone's familiar with her, she has her company's called Liminal Botanica, or is it Liminal Roots Botanica? I really should check, but I can't find her little card thing, and she did send me one. But she is on Instagram and is a very sweet human whose writing inspires me often, and I actually have her book, which I purchased way back at its release date, however many years ago that was. It's a treasure, let me get it. So this is her book, Honeycomb Heart, Prayers, Poems and Offerings for the Journey. And I absolutely adore this. I do a lot of bibliomancy with it because it's particularly just ripe for that, basically. But I really, really love this. Out of this lovely, because I'm not going to show everything, it was such a generous giveaway. There was a recipe meets spell book, which is very cool, but too big for me to pick up at the moment because my back's already uncomfortable sitting and doing this. And also a really gorgeous hardbound journal, but it's undated, which means it's perfect for me and I will genuinely use it, and it opens flat, which is the best way to do a hardbacked. Did I say hardbound? Either way, it's the best way to do anything that has a hard cover, because I'm a bit of a soft cover girl otherwise. It also came with some very funny badges, a very cute little sticker of her horse, Rabbit, and then there's several other items, and that's what I'm about to show you. So the two that came with the giveaway, the two other bits, I don't think I've missed anything else. One of them was one of the decks. She has made 2 decks and I had them both on my wish list. This one's far newer. So this is called the Here and Now Oracle. And it's teeny tiny, so I'll show you up close. And all of the words on it are RE words, which I love. I love this. I cannot believe that I didn't think of this. Not because I have a fabulous brain, but because I am obsessed with words. This was such a good idea. It's just super, super accessible. I've already used them in about 4 different ways, including a poetry piece that I did with a 𝗕𝗔𝗍𝗄𝗏 tarot, which was very fun. But yeah, there's loads of ways that you can use these. The little mushroom backings are a wonderful little touch. I'm utterly obsessed with them. And then also made by 𝗬𝗁 was this clay pot with the little ghosty on it, which is adorable. And honestly, originally I was going to use this for my ancestral and spirit altar for offerings inside, which I still feel like it would be perfect for. However, it turns out that this 𝗕𝗁𝗀 deck, I don't think this was her intention, fits perfectly inside it, and it means it sits out on my, I mean, this whole room's like various altars basically, or sacred spaces, or just spaces where I've got my shit, and it sits out on one of them, and then it's just easily accessible for me to use constantly, which it did come with a little baggie, but this is perfect. So that is how it's been living. Now, the other deck, which I have already put in my foxy bag, has been on my wish list for such a long time as well. Such a long time. She's based in Canada, and one of my Canadian friends got it straight away, and I think that I've been ogling it ever since, if I'm honest. And this is her animal deck. I've just always really loved the artwork on this in particular. There's something about it that really drew me in, and I knew that I would enjoy her musings on the animals as well. The book isn't here, but it's a kind of A5 size book, but it's a hardcover. So yes, this is another animal deck, folks, because to be honest, they truly bring me deep joy, and all of my animal decks see use in my practice, because waste not, want not. Like, I genuinely use actually multiple animal decks every month. I have them out for workings and offerings, and yeah, you do not need all of the animal decks. However, I put mine to good use, and I'm so elated to finally have it like ticked off. I will play a very long game when it comes to decks, in terms of them being the right price for me at the right time for me. I have missed out on some decks that were really up there for me, and I'll probably never get another chance because one of those few things wasn't right. But yeah, so it was just really good timing, and it felt nice to add a purchase to this epic giveaway offering and support her business that way as well, which of course wasn't expected. But yeah, I'm really excited to have this. I have already used it. You could see horse was on top. I used it for this month's, so May. It's May the 1st today. Beltane blessings to those of you who celebrate, or May Day, or if you're in other parts of the world and it's Samhain. Yeah, this is the 1st of May, so I've already used and picked the animal for the month, and we're working with horse for May. But one of the other things that I like about this deck, which you'll have seen, is the kind of elemental additions to it as well, and then it has directional ones as well, which hopefully we will come across in a minute. And I've already spent some time with them, and first wanted to develop my own ideas about them and kind of guess what was going on in there and what the vibe was for me. And then I looked at the book, and it was very in line with what I was getting anyway, which means great artwork, right? I freaking love this card as well. This gives me like Old One kind of vibes. It's just such a mood. The North in particular is such a mood. So it's kind of a, I think eclectic's a bit too far, but you know, it's got a bit of a mixture going on in here, which makes a lot of sense to me. I cannot say any more things about it because it's just a love fest. I don't know, are you happy to listen to my love fests? One thing I will say is that I'm not a lover of having writing on the back of cards, but like the deck that I first had was the medicine cards, and whilst the lightning bolt itself makes sense for the cultural ties that deck is so intrinsically woven in from around, the colours are garish at best, and I love them because to me that is quintessential medicine card goodness, the bright blue backs and the yellow lightning bolt. So what I am not massively into can also become like a beloved quirky feature. I found this very cool. I don't need to. There's a loose stone in this bit, but I found this adderstone, hagstone, whatever you want to call them, in a shopping car park. That's right. In a shopping car park with loads of other normie stones, and I took it. I took it. They're a massive shopping corporation, so I took the stone. I was very happy with that. But yeah, random car park find. How's that? And then this is by a lovely creator who I'm going to link. It's 𝗬𝘁𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 heartfelt bone worker. Like, I don't know how else to describe her. You know, she goes out, she forages them herself, she processes them herself. She has a deep reverence and a love for them. She's an amazing artist as well, in terms of drawing, because this to me is art in itself. And she had these little cigarette, which is just fucking cute. I mean, I'm a weirdo. The aristocrat of cigarettes, every cigarette box was different, and then they're reinforced with like this cork, I think. They're just really beautiful, magical, tiny little curio. And I don't tend to get many things like this, but I know how much time and love went into these. What else this month before we finish up? I didn't game much until about 3 days before April ended. It's not new, so many of you might have heard of it. It's called Spiritfarer, which I had started playing, and I go through these weird like stages where I alternate about 4 different games at a time over a really long period. So some of those at the moment are like Animal Crossing, Pokemon Violet, Cozy Grove. I'm trying to think if there's anything else, and then Spiritfarer. They've been the ones predominantly at the moment. So I'm back on Spiritfarer and I love it. The only way I can really describe it is kind of like nerdy gamer meets death witches or spirit workers or just animal people. I feel like all of the above would love it. It does get you in the feels. You have to pass on the spirits and you get to know them. So I suppose, two factors. One, you have to be someone who's okay with reading the narrative and having like a bit of story to the game. There's not too much, and so it's worth it. It's really, really just done very well, actually. And there's also a farming type function, although not an actual farm, you're actually on a boat. And then the other thing I would note is there's a faster passing of the day, but not in a stressful speed. Like, you know, some of those, I can't remember the names at the moment, like seasonal farm games, Harvest Moon or Stardew Valley, which unless you have it on PC and you can do mods, like it just goes too fast for me. It's so incredibly stressful. I can't deal with it. So these, like this game's far slower than that, and there's much more time to enjoy one given day, and of course you can play as many days as you like in one go. So I highly recommend Spiritfarer. You probably would want to watch someone do a proper review of it though and see some gameplay, as opposed to my slapdash way of trying to explain it, but it's very good. And then I didn't really get much time or feel a need for like any spell work. I do a lot more ritual workings, which are different, or other undertakings that are still part of the craft. Also, a lot of my practice occurs outside in the warmer months, and the focus seems to shift a lot more of what I'm putting out and helping, as opposed to anything I'm trying to like bring in or achieve. It's kind of hard to explain because there's not a hard and fast rule, but I do feel a shift between like spring and summer as one set of how I practice and the energies, and then autumn and winter as the other way, them being a lot more internal. That's something that I've noticed over time anyway. I spent a lot of time focused with Odin and Freyja, had the poetry, and just really just spent some time with my family, grieved the loss of sorts, which I don't even want to talk about. Also, one of our geckos, Jagger, is moving through some health stuff at the moment, so that's not my favourite thing, of course, but he seems okay for the time being. And yeah, I kind of just waited out my appointments as well and held on for my time in the forest, which was just so good. And I think that's it. I did start out the month watching tarot content and then didn't really watch much to the end of the month. One video that sticks out is Heather, and I believe Heather's channel is simply called 𝗵𝘁𝗄𝗏. She did a reintroduction video and spoke a bit about herself and her practice, and I just thought that the approach was a really interesting one of how she introduced us to herself as a person as well as the layers of practice. So I'll put that link below, but that's it from me. My back is really hurting, so I'm going to stop there, and hopefully I'll edit this and get it up soon. I'll see you later in the month. Bye.